Back with more Velshi. I'm Charles Coleman Jr. sitting in for Ali. When President Biden signed his most sweeping bill into law, the landmark Inflation Reduction Act, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin was right there by his side. The massive climate, health care, and tax bill was a compromise deal that Manchin himself brokered. He was instrumental in the passage of it, so much so that as soon as the president signed it, he literally handed the pen to Manchin himself. And Joe Manchin was proud of it. The press release out of his office that came out that day was headlined, Manchin's Inflation Reduction Act signed into law. All caps, all bold. That was 1 year ago this week. But when the president celebrates the anniversary of his and Joe Manchin's landmark bill, Joe Manchin is not going to be there. They say politics makes for strange bedfellows, and this is a perfect example. NBC News is now reporting that Manchin, though he was invited, is not going to be attending the White House event this week. Now, you guys got to remember, Manchin is the guy who was the Republican, and then he wasn't, and then he became a Democrat, but he didn't want to do what any Democrats wanted to do. So he's not always in the mood to play nice. But what he is not in the mood to do in this instance is celebrate his own accomplishment. Well, what does he want to do? He does want to openly discuss leaving the Democratic Party. He does want to talk about hanging out with the third-party group, No Labels. And he does generally want to flirt with the idea of now running as a potential spoiler candidate for president. No surprise there. I'm joined now by a lot of people who have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. Rick Wilson is a former Republican strategist, the co-founder of the Lincoln Project and host of the Enemies List podcast, as well as the author of the book Running Against the Devil, a plot to save America from Trump and Democrats themselves. Also here with me is former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh of Illinois. He ran for president against Donald Trump in 2020 and is host of the podcast White Flag with Joe Walsh, and also the author of the book F Silence, calling out Trump for the cultish, moronic, authoritarian con man that he is. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. Joe, I want to start with you because I know you have a lot of thoughts, a lot to say about No Labels, a lot to say about Joe Manchin and third-party candidates. Now that we're hearing this news from Joe Manchin about potentially stepping into 2024 under a No Labels banner, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts, Charles, and it's good to be with you, and it's always good to be Rick, is that Joe Manchin, like so many others, is utterly selfish at this moment in time. Joe Manchin has decided to place his own personal ambition above what's best for the country. Let's be clear. Donald Trump is an existential threat to our democracy. He can never, ever, ever be in the White House again. The way to stop that, the only way to stop that, is for all of us who believe in democracy to support the Democratic nominee, which is Joe Biden. Charles, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a conservative, but I care about our democracy, so I'm supporting Joe Biden, whoever the Democratic nominee is. Manchin is not alone. He's placing his own ambition ahead of what's best for the country.
He always has, and I want to follow up with you really quickly on that point, Joe. So for your Republican colleagues, the ones who are also conservatives but also support Donald Trump, what do you say to them when they are still on the Trump bandwagon and refuse to get off, even at the cost of what could be our democracy?
Look, any Republican, and Rick knows this, any Republican or conservative who's even not all the way there on Trump, man, if they care about our democracy, they have to support the Democratic nominee. I mean, I'm in the trenches every day, Charles, trying to convince people in MAGA world to fight for our democracy. That's a tough lift. But when you take all the rest of us conservatives, independents, Democrats, and progressives, if we all come together at this moment in time, we can stop Trump.
Rick, you were one of the first people who came out in the Never Trump Republican Party and group. Do you think that Joe Manchin is ever going to be the one to appeal to Never Trumpers and be able to capture that section of the electorate that wants to stay conservative, potentially does not want to vote Democrat, does not, fool with Joe Biden, but, is looking for somewhere to go? Could this be their answer?
the problem here, Charles, is that No Labels is very carefully crafted. As my friend Joe just said, it's changing MAGA voters is the hardest thing in the world. Yeah. But No Labels has carefully crafted a plan backed by Republican money, backed by $70 million of Republican donor money, including folks like Harlan Crow, who's Clarence Thomas's sponsor. They built a plan that is designed to do one thing. That is to split off conservative Democrats to a guy like a Joe Manchin, so that Joe Biden loses in key electoral college states and they guarantee that Donald Trump will be president again. Every time Nancy Jacobson, the head of No Labels, and Mark Penn, the strategist of No Labels, are confronted with this, they absolutely lie about it. They say, oh, no, that's not what's going to happen, even though their own publicly released polling says that Trump will be the one who gains advantage in the electoral college based on their third-party scam. And that's what this is. And Joe Manchin, whether it's venality or ego or mendacity or some other combination of character flaws, as Joe said, this is a guy who will put money and ego well ahead of the country, because the absolute end result of the No Labels third-party candidate, especially given the states they're getting on the ballot in, which is a strategic decision on their part, they're going to hurt Biden and help Trump.
Joe, you ran against Donald Trump when he was the sitting incumbent president. He's out of office now. He has led Republicans during the midterms and everywhere else to loss after loss after loss, or at least underperformances in the past. 3 different elections, and now he's under a bunch of different indictments. We may see something out of Georgia. He's got 2 at the federal level and counting, and there's still what's going on here in New York. Why is it that none of the Republicans who are currently running against him are making any traction?
Because it's Trump's party. Look, this was always an impossible road for these guys. You cannot, there is no lane in the Republican Party to be anti-Trump. Chris Christie, Will Hurd, these guys going after Trump, they can't win. The only lane is the Trump lane. So all of these other candidates have to kind of sort of hug Trump and just hope and wait that he can't win. But this is Trump's party. It's Trump's nomination. I think it's a foregone conclusion. I think it's always been his nomination as long as he's in it.
Rick, I want to talk for a second about No Labels. One reason that the Lincoln Project has been very critical is that they haven't really disclosed who's funding them. We don't know where this money is coming from. But beyond that, tell me what the specific concern about funding them is. Are we thinking about, the Scooby-Doo cartoon where you pull off the hood from the ghost and you realize it's Old Man Winter from the convenience store? Is that what we're worried about with respect to the funding issue?
It's not that we're wondering where it is. We know where it is. We've seen now in some of their latest reporting that people that are maxed out to Ron DeSantis are also giving to No Labels. There's something here that, you follow the stink of the dead fish and it always leads to a dead fish. This is an organization that is being funded almost exclusively by oil and gas guys, by hedge fund bros, by private equity types. These are not exactly your profile in progressive or Democratic or centrist donors. These are Republican donors. John Catsimatidis, a major donor to Trump and to Rudy and all these other things, is one of the big funders of No Labels. All these people that are giving them money, they're not unsophisticated politically. They know what they're doing. They don't want to show up on Trump's report, but they'd be happy to have Trump back and get the tax cuts and the regulatory relief that he's going to provide them. And so No Labels is a shell game. It is a con game. Nancy and Mark are con artists in the political space of America, and they refuse to say where their money comes from. Now, they also say that they're not going to have a primary for the No Labels party when it runs a candidate. They're going to have a secret meeting where Nancy's donors all come together in a room and they pick the candidate. That doesn't sound much like democracy to me. It doesn't sound like a middle path or an insurance policy. It sounds like a kleptocratic scam that's more at home in Russia than America.